At Hillbrook Community Hospital, Victor Blackwood's commanding presence filled his office as he faced his daughter, Jessica. His steel gray hair and tailored suit projected the image of a successful healthcare magnate, but his expression showed growing frustration. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. This isn't a request, Jessica. You're starting your nursing internship next week, Victor stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jessica, dressed in designer clothes that seemed to mock the sterile hospital environment, crossed her arms. Dad, I've told you 100 times, I have no interest in medicine. My fashion blog is taking off, and enough. Victor's palm hit his mahogany desk. Your lifestyle costs this family millions. It's time you learned about responsibility and hard work. The hospital needs additional staff, and you need structure. The next Monday, Jessica walked through the hospital's automatic doors, feeling like an alien in her new blue scrubs. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on everything, making the already intimidating environment feel even more hostile. Nurses rushed past her with purpose, while she stood there clutching her orientation packet. You must be Jessica, a calm voice said behind her. She turned to find a young doctor with kind eyes extending his hand. I'm Dr. Lucas Chen. Don't worry, everyone feels overwhelmed their first day. Throughout her first shift, Jessica observed the controlled chaos of the nursing station, the constant beeping of monitors, phones ringing, and the hurried conversations about medications and vital signs made her head spin. Her designer watch, now hidden under her sleeve, seemed absurd in this practical environment. Her first patient assignment brought her to room 412, where she met Edna Thompson. The elderly woman's thin frame seemed to disappear into the hospital bed, but her eyes sparkled with life. Come closer, dear, Edna beckoned. These old eyes aren't what they used to be. Despite her initial reluctance, Jessica found herself drawn into conversation with Edna. The older woman shared stories about her days as a jazz club singer in the 1960s, her voice still carrying traces of its former melody. You know, Edna said, adjusting her oxygen tube, sometimes the best things in life come from the places we least want to be. Jessica noticed how Edna's breathing seemed labored, how her medication list grew longer each day. Something about the woman's fragility stirred an unfamiliar protective instinct in Jessica. As she checked Edna's vital signs, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right about her father's hospital. That first day ended with Jessica exhausted but thoughtful. As she changed out of her scrubs, Dr. Lucas passed by the locker room. You survived, he smiled. That's the hardest part. Jessica nodded, but her mind was already working on something else. Beyond the physical demands of nursing, she'd noticed things. Whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, strange glances between staff members, and most troublingly, the way some administrators looked at Edna's room with an interest that seemed beyond professional concern. This wasn't the simple punishment her father had intended. Instead, Jessica found herself at the beginning of something much bigger than herself, though she didn't yet know just how deep the hospital's secrets went. During her second week at the hospital, Jessica made a discovery that turned her unease into genuine concern. While filing paperwork in the administrative office, she noticed a pattern in recent patient records. Multiple elderly patients, including Edna, had modified their wills in the past month. The common denominator: they all named Hillbrook Hospital as their primary beneficiary. Jessica pulled Edna's file first. The documents showed a substantial estate being redirected from family members to the hospital's endowment fund. Similar changes appeared in 5 other files from the geriatric ward alone. That's confidential information, a sharp voice startled her. Nurse Martinez stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Jessica quickly closed the file. I was just organizing the paperwork, Jessica said, trying to sound casual. I noticed Mrs. Thompson's file needed updating. Let the administrative staff handle those matters, Nurse Martinez replied, her tone clipped. Focus on your assigned duties. Over the next few days, Jessica attempted to gather information from other nurses. During lunch breaks, she'd casually bring up the topic of patient donations. How often do patients leave money to the hospital? She asked Sarah, a veteran nurse. Sarah's shoulders tensed. We don't discuss patient financial matters. But surely it's unusual to have so many changes at once. Listen, Sarah lowered her voice. Some questions are better left unasked, especially by the CEO's daughter. The resistance she met only heightened Jessica's suspicions. Even the usually chatty nurses clammed up when she mentioned wills or donations. Their eyes would dart away, or they'd suddenly remember urgent tasks. Later that week, Jessica found Dr. Lucas reviewing charts at an empty nursing station. "Can I ask you something?" she said, checking to ensure they were alone. "Have you noticed anything strange about patient donations lately?" Lucas's expression shifted subtly. He glanced around before responding. "What have you heard? Multiple patients changing their wills, all in favor of the hospital. It seems coordinated." Lucas set down his charts and leaned closer. "There are rumors," he said quietly, "about a group called the Protectors. They supposedly ensure the hospital's financial security." "The Protectors," Jessica repeated. "Nobody talks about them openly, but they're said to have significant influence over hospital operations. Some staff believe they're just a myth. Others," he paused, "others say they're very real and very powerful. What do you believe?" Lucas straightened up as footsteps approached. "I believe," he said carefully, "that your father runs a very successful hospital. How he maintains that success, well, that's something you might want to look into carefully." The conversation left Jessica with more questions than answers. Her father had always presented himself as a businessman who transformed struggling hospitals into profitable institutions. But now, watching administrators hover around wealthy, elderly patients, seeing the fear in nurses' eyes when she asked questions, she wondered about the true cost of that success. That night, as Jessica left the hospital, she noticed a group of board members entering her father's office for an unscheduled meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see their serious expressions as Victor gestured emphatically. One phrase caught her ear as someone opened the door. "The endowment must be protected at all costs." The words seemed innocent enough, but combined with everything else, they sent a chill down Jessica's spine. She realized she was no longer just serving an unwanted internship. She was standing at the edge of something much darker, and her father might be at the center of it all. The mention of the Protectors nagged at Jessica's memory. She recalled overhearing two nurses discussing a former employee, Margaret Wells, who had kept detailed journals about her time at Hillbrook. If anyone had documented the hospital's secrets, it would have been her. Jessica waited until the night shift, when the hospital corridors grew quiet. Using her father's master keycard, which he'd borrowed from his home office, she accessed the basement archives. The room smelled of dust and forgotten papers, with rows of metal filing cabinets stretching into the shadows. The fluorescent lights flickered as she moved through the aisles, checking labels, administrative records, personnel files, patient histories. Finally, in a corner behind a stack of old equipment, she found a cabinet marked Staff Personal Effects Predoi 010. Her hands trembled as she pulled open the drawer labeled W. Inside, beneath routine paperwork and performance reviews, lay a worn leather notebook. Margaret Wells' name was written in faded ink on the cover. Jessica began reading. April 15th, 2009, something's wrong at Hillbrook. The Protectors held another midnight meeting. 3 more patients changed their wills this week. Harrison in 506 refused, found unresponsive this morning. They're calling it natural causes. June 3, 2009. They're watching me. I've documented every suspicious death, every changed will. The pattern is clear. Dr. Morris warned me to stop asking questions. What happened to do no harm? August 28, 2009, last entry. They know, I know. If anything happens to me, Check the connection between administrative board meetings and patient deaths. The timing isn't coincidental. VB is behind everything. God help us all. The journal ended abruptly. Jessica's research revealed that Margaret had resigned suddenly, citing personal reasons. No forwarding address was listed. With shaking hands, Jessica photographed key pages with her phone. As she replaced the journal, a noise startled her. Footsteps approached the archive room. She ducked behind a cabinet just as the door opened. Through the gap between filing cabinets, she recognized Dr. Lucas. "Jessica," he called softly. "I saw the light from the hallway." She emerged from her hiding spot, clutching her phone. "Lucas, look at what I found." They sat on dusty boxes as she shared Margaret's entries. Lucas's face grew increasingly grim. "My father worked with Dr. Morris," he revealed. "He was chief of medicine before your father took over. Dad always said Victor's arrival marked the beginning of the end for the hospital's integrity. He resigned in protest, but nobody would listen to his concerns." "What happened to him?" Jessica asked. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Car accident. The brakes failed on his way to a board meeting where he planned to present evidence of financial misconduct. The implications hung heavy in the musty air." Jessica studied Lucas's face, seeing the pain of old wounds. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "It's dangerous." "Because Margaret was right. Something is deeply wrong here. And maybe the CEO's daughter and the former chief of medicine's son are exactly who need to expose it." As they left the archives, Jessica felt the weight of Margaret's journal in her mind. The woman had tried to warn them all, only to disappear into silence. How many others had been silenced? And how close were she and Lucas to meeting the same fate? The hospital seemed different now, its sterile corridors hiding decades of secrets. Jessica realized she wasn't just investigating suspicious deaths. She was unraveling a conspiracy that could bring down her father's empire. And somewhere in the shadows, the protectors were watching. The following week, Jessica was assigned to care for Robert Chen, a wealthy real estate developer recovering from heart surgery. Unlike other affluent patients, he seemed agitated, constantly watching the door as if expecting unwanted visitors. During her morning rounds, Jessica found him arguing with a hospital administrator she recognized from her father's inner circle. "I've told you, my will stands as is," Robert insisted, his heart monitor beeping faster. "My grandchildren need that inheritance." The administrator's polite smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Chen, consider the good your estate could do for future patients. The protectors ensure all donations are properly." He stopped abruptly when he noticed Jessica in the doorway. With a curt nod, he left the room. Once they were alone, Robert grabbed Jessica's wrist. "You're Victor's daughter?" he whispered urgently. "Listen carefully. The protectors aren't philanthropists. They're vultures." The door opened as a nurse entered with medication. Robert immediately released Jessica's arm and fell silent. That evening, while updating patient charts, Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Curiosity killed more than cats. "Stop asking questions about the protectors." Minutes later, another message. "Your father's position won't protect you forever." Jessica's hands shook as she showed the messages to Lucas in an empty consultation room. "They're watching you," he said, checking that the door was closed. "This is getting serious." "I can't stop now," Jessica replied. "Not after what Mr. Chen said. Did you see how quickly he went quiet when that nurse came in? He's terrified." Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "We need to be smarter about this. No more obvious questions, no direct confrontations. We gather evidence quietly. And then what? Then we find someone who can help us expose everything. Someone outside the hospital's influence." As they discussed strategy, Jessica noticed something odd about the consultation room's business card holder. Behind the standard hospital cards, she found one that was different. It belonged to a Detective Sarah Martinez from the city's Financial Crimes Unit. "Look at the date," Lucas pointed out. "This was printed last week. Someone else is investigating the hospital." Jessica pocketed the card. We need to contact her, but carefully. If the protectors have eyes everywhere, they'll be watching traditional communication channels, Lucas finished. We need a secure way to reach her. They agreed to use Lucas's private clinic as a meeting point, somewhere outside hospital surveillance. But as Jessica left that night, she felt eyes following her every move. In the parking lot, she noticed a dark sedan with tinted windows. It started its engine when she approached her car, but didn't move. A warning. Her phone buzzed again. Last chance. Walk away, or things get unpleasant. Ask Margaret Wells what happens to people who don't listen. Jessica sat in her car, heart pounding. The threat was clear, but it confirmed something important. Margaret Wells was alive somewhere. If they could find her, they'd have a key witness. The sedan remained in her rearview mirror for half her drive home, then vanished down a side street. The message was clear. They could reach her anywhere. That night, Jessica barely slept. Every noise made her jump. Her father's empire was built on intimidation and secrets, but she had inherited his stubbornness. The protectors had made a crucial mistake. Threatening her had only strengthened her resolve. Tomorrow, she would contact Detective Martinez. But first, she needed to ensure Robert Chun's safety. Something told her the protectors wouldn't take his refusal lightly. Jessica's fears about patient safety were quickly validated. Over 3 days, 2 elderly patients who had refused to modify their wills were transferred to specialized facilities. When she checked the transfer locations, they didn't exist. Robert Chen's condition suddenly deteriorated, requiring him to be moved to intensive care. Jessica reviewed his charts. His vital signs had been stable until a new medication was introduced. During her rounds, she noticed other patterns. Wealthy patients who agreed to change their wills received exceptional care. Those who refused faced complications, medication errors, or mysterious transfers. One night, while completing late-shift paperwork, Jessica overheard voices from the administrative office. She pretended to organize supplies nearby. "The list needs cleaning," a male voice said. She recognized him as James Morton, the hospital's financial director. "The board is pressuring for results. Chen is being difficult." Another voice responded, "Dr. Phillips, head of internal medicine. But we have ways of handling that. What concerns me is Victor's daughter nosing around. Victor assured us he'd handle her. And if he can't, then the protectors will. We didn't spend 20 years building this system to let some privileged brat destroy it." Jessica's blood ran cold. She accidentally knocked over a box of gloves, alerting them to her presence. "Someone there," Morton called out. Jessica quickly grabbed the box. "Sorry, just restocking supplies," she called back, keeping her voice casual despite her racing heart. Later that night, she met Lucas in the hospital's empty cafeteria. "They're going to kill him," she whispered urgently. "Chen, and maybe others. I heard them talking about cleaning the list." Lucas looked grim. "My father suspected something like this years ago. Patient deaths that seemed convenient. Wealthy donors dying after changing their wills. We need to move faster," Jessica insisted. "But Morton mentioned my father handling me." "Lucas, how involved is he in all this?" "Jessica," Lucas hesitated. "Your father's name appears in too many documents to be coincidental. The protectors operate with hospital board approval. As CEO, the implications hit her hard. Her father wasn't just aware of these activities, he was orchestrating them. I found more," Lucas continued. "Every board member has offshore accounts receiving regular deposits. The money trail leads back to a shell company called Hill Protection Services. My father's middle name is Hill," Jessica said quietly. "He named it after himself. God, how did I not see this before?" They were interrupted by Jessica's phone buzzing. Another text. "Cleaning in progress. Stay out of it." Looking up, she saw Morton watching them from across the cafeteria before disappearing through a door. "If Chen dies," Jessica said, "it's not just fraud anymore. It's murder. We need proof," Lucas replied. "Not just suspicions or overheard conversations. Real evidence that links the protectors to these deaths. I know where to start, Jessica said. The medication logs. Every patient who refused them had sudden complications. There must be a pattern in what drugs were administered. That's heavily restricted information, Lucas warned. Then it's a good thing my father never changed his password patterns, Jessica replied. He's used the same combination of my birthday and his middle name for everything since I was a kid. They agreed to meet again the next day, but as Jessica walked to her car, she realized something that chilled her more than any threat could. She wasn't just investigating criminals anymore. She was investigating her own father. And if the protectors were willing to kill patients for money, what would they do to protect their leader? Using her father's password pattern, Jessica and Lucas accessed the hospital's secure medical records late one night. The evidence was damning. Every patient who refused to change their will had received medication adjustments from the same group of doctors, all board members. Look at this. Jessica pointed to her laptop screen. Increased dosages, unauthorized medication changes, all signed off by Dr. Phillips or his direct reports. Lucas cross-referenced the dates. Every death or transfer happened within 72 hours of these changes. They're systematic about it. They documented everything: dates, medication changes, staff involved, and patient outcomes. The pattern was undeniable. Meanwhile, Edna Thompson's condition began deteriorating rapidly. They're moving faster now, Jessica said, checking Edna's latest vitals. Her blood pressure is dropping, but they've added medications that could worsen it. They know we're investigating, Lucas replied. They're accelerating their timeline. While reviewing security footage from the hospital's backup server, they discovered something crucial. Every Wednesday night, a group of board members accessed a supposedly unused conference room in the East Wing. Jessica decided to risk everything. Using her access card, she planted her phone in the conference room, its recording app running. That night, hidden in an adjacent storage closet, she listened through her earbuds as the protectors gathered. The endowment needs 2 million more by quarter's end. Morton's voice came through clearly. Thompson's estate would cover half that. She's resistant, Dr. Phillips responded. Her granddaughter's been asking questions. Handle it like the others, a third voice. Jessica recognized the hospital's legal counsel. Stage 1 today. Stage 2, if needed. We can't miss our targets. Victor's asking about the offshore accounts, Morton added. He's worried about his daughter snooping. Remind him what happened to the last board member who developed a conscience, someone said. Dr. Morris wasn't the first accident we arranged. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Lucas's father's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. What about Chen? Phillips asked. Proceeding as planned. By morning, he'll have suffered a tragic complication. Natural causes, of course. And Victor's daughter, we're watching her. If she becomes a problem, she'll have an accident of her own. Jessica had heard enough. She retrieved her phone when they left, hands shaking. Meeting Lucas in the parking lot, she played him the recording. His face went pale at the mention of his father. We need to protect Chen and Edna tonight, he said. They'll move quickly now. I'll stay with Edna, Jessica offered. You watch Chen. They won't risk anything with witnesses present. But as they turned to go back inside, Jessica noticed something. The security cameras that usually covered the parking lot were turned off, and in the shadows between cars, figures were moving. Lucas, she whispered, we're not alone. The hospital's seemingly routine night shift was about to become a race against time. The protectors were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were moving into the open, and Jessica realized that before she could save anyone else, she and Lucas would have to save themselves. The next morning, Jessica stormed into her father's office, digital evidence secured on multiple devices. Tell me you're not part of this, she demanded, closing the door behind her. Victor barely looked up from his computer. Part of what? Jessica, the protectors, the deaths, the accidents. Please tell me you didn't know. Victor sighed, finally meeting her eyes. Hospitals need money to save lives, Jessica. more than you could understand. Everything we do serves a greater purpose. Greater purpose? You're killing people. We're ensuring the survival of an institution that saves thousands. A few strategic losses for the greater good. They were people, Dad, not statistics. Victor's expression hardened. You've always been naive about how the world works. Why do you think I put you here? To learn that sometimes difficult decisions are necessary. Murdering patients is never necessary. Careful, Jessica. Victor's voice dropped dangerously. You're making accusations without understanding the consequences. The threat wasn't subtle. Jessica realized the father she thought she knew had never existed. Leaving his office, she immediately texted Lucas. He's fully involved. We need to move now. They met in the hospital chapel, where surveillance was minimal. Edna's being pressured to sign today, Jessica whispered. They're calling it a routine update to her medical directives. Chun's deteriorating too, Lucas added. They've restricted visitor access. They've formulated a plan. Lucas would use his medical authority to transfer Chen to another hospital, while Jessica would stay with Edna, preventing any unauthorized medication changes. But as Jessica headed to Edna's room, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Final warning. Some daughters should learn to respect their fathers. Accidents can happen anywhere. The last message included a photo of her car's cut brake lines. Running to Edna's room, Jessica found 2 administrators already there with paperwork. Miss Blackwood, one smiled coldly. This is a private consultation. Mrs. Thompson needs rest, Jessica insisted, checking Edna's for doctor's orders. Orders can change, the second administrator said meaningfully. Jessica stood her ground. Not while I'm her nurse. After they left, Edna grabbed Jessica's hand. They've been pressuring me for days, dear, threatening to deny treatment if I don't sign. I won't let them hurt you, Jessica promised, even as her phone buzzed with more threats. She texted Lucas, they're everywhere. Be careful. His response was immediate. Too late. They're blocking Chen's transfer. Need help. Jessica was torn. Both patients needed protection, but she couldn't be in 2 places at once. And with every passing minute, the protectors grew bolder. She heard footsteps approaching, multiple sets, purposeful. The night shift was starting, when accidents were most common. Jessica locked Edna's door, pushing a chair under the handle. Her phone buzzed one final time. You were warned. Now watch what happens. The footsteps stopped outside. Someone tried the handle. Jessica stood in front of Edna's bed, heart pounding, realizing that her investigation had led to this moment. But she wasn't just fighting for evidence anymore. She was fighting for lives. With the footsteps approaching Edna's door, Jessica quickly hit the emergency medical alert button, triggering monitor alarms throughout the floor. The footsteps retreated as staff rushed to respond. Using the confusion, Jessica leaned close to Edna, whispering, "They're trying to force you to change your will. Have you noticed anything suspicious?" Edna's eyes sharpened. "Every night, different doctors adjust my medications. My blood pressure keeps dropping, but they increase the dosage anyway. I may be old, dear, but I'm not stupid. We need to get proof," Jessica said, checking the corridor. "Can you help me?" Edna nodded subtly. "The night nurse always recites my medications aloud while administering them. If you hide your phone nearby." Jessica positioned her phone behind Edna's water pitcher, recording app running. Just then, heavy footsteps approached. As Jessica updated charts at the nurse's station, she noticed someone watching her, a man she didn't recognize, too well dressed to be hospital staff. He followed her movements with practiced precision. Lucas appeared, looking shaken. "They've moved Chen to a restricted floor. I can't access him." Before Jessica could respond, the mysterious man approached them. "Jessica Blackwood, Michael Torres, former charge nurse. We need to talk." They moved to the chapel again. Torres looked over his shoulder before speaking. "I worked with Margaret Wells," he said. "I was here when it all started, when the protectors first formed. You know Margaret." Jessica leaned forward. "Where is she?" "Safe, underground. She had to disappear after they tried to silence her. Torres pulled out a worn envelope. She kept records of everything: dates, names, account numbers. I've been gathering evidence since she left. Why come forward now? Lucas asked. Because history is repeating itself. The same patterns, the same methods, but this time they're getting sloppy, desperate. Torres handed them the envelope. Margaret wants you to have this. She's been watching, waiting for someone brave enough to expose them. Inside were documents detailing years of suspicious deaths, forged signatures, and medication errors, all connected to sudden changes in patient wills. There's more, Torres said. The protectors aren't just hospital administrators. They've got judges, police chiefs, even state health officials in their pocket. Your father built a network. How deep does it go? Jessica asked. Deep enough that Margaret's still hiding 10 years later. Deep enough that they could make anyone disappear. Torres checked his watch nervously. I've already stayed too long. They watch everything. We need your help, Lucas urged. Your testimony would get me killed. Torres cut him off. I've given you the evidence. The rest is up to you. He stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Check the basement storage room, behind the old radiology files. Margaret left something there, in case anyone ever got this far. After Torres left, Jessica and Lucas exchanged looks. They had allies, hidden ones, but allies nonetheless. The protectors weren't invincible. Jessica's phone buzzed. A recording of Edna's night nurse administering unauthorized medication changes. Clear evidence of tampering. We need to move fast, Lucas said. Once they realize Torres contacted us, they'll clean house. Jessica finished. We need to get to that storage room. But as they headed for the basement, Jessica's phone lit up with a message that made her blood run cold. Say goodbye to Chen. Cleanup in progress. Jessica and Lucas rushed to the main conference room where her father was delivering his quarterly hospital address. The room was packed with staff, board members, and local media. The perfect audience. We can't let them kill Chen, Jessica whispered as they slipped in. But we need to handle this carefully. The protectors have too many allies in here. Victor stood at the podium, projecting confidence. Hillbrook's endowment has grown significantly this quarter, ensuring we can provide top-tier care to all patients. Jessica stood, evidence folder in hand. By killing those who won't contribute, the room fell silent. Victor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. My daughter is passionate about patient care, he said smoothly. But perhaps this isn't the appropriate forum. I have proof, Jessica announced, her voice carrying across the room. Recordings, documents, witness statements. The protectors aren't protecting anything except their bank accounts. Board member James Morton stood up. Miss Blackwood is clearly suffering from stress. Security, please escort her out. Play the recording, Lucas urged. Jessica connected her phone to the room's audio system, a trick she'd learned from years of social media streaming. The conference room speakers crackled to life with the previous night's protectors meeting. Stage 1 today. Stage 2, if needed. Handle it like the others. Remind him what happened to the last board member who developed a conscience. Victor's facade cracked slightly. Morton moved toward the audio controls, but Lucas blocked his path. There's more, Jessica continued. Financial records showing millions filtered through offshore accounts. Death certificates with falsified causes. Medication logs proving systematic patient tampering. These are serious allegations. A reporter stood up. Dr. Blackwood, how do you respond? Before Victor could speak, Morton cut in. This is a family matter. Doctor. Blackwood has been managing a difficult situation with his troubled daughter. My troubled daughter. Victor suddenly spoke, his voice cold. Doesn't understand the complexities of modern healthcare. Sometimes difficult decisions, like murdering Dr. Maurice. Lucas interrupted. Like forcing Margaret Wells into hiding. Like trying to kill Robert Chen right now. The room erupted in murmurs. Security guards moved toward Jessica and Lucas. but stopped when cameras turned their way. Morton reached the podium. Everything we've done was approved by the board. Legal, necessary. The endowment ensures thousands receive care by killing the vulnerable. Jessica challenged, by threatening and silencing anyone who objects. Enough. Victor's shout silenced the room. Jessica, you're making accusations without understanding. I understand perfectly. She cut him off. The protectors aren't about helping people. They're about power, money, control, and you're their leader. Morton smiled coldly. Prove it. Your evidence is circumstantial. Your witnesses are hiding. Your credibility is questionable. The board stands behind Dr. Blackwood completely. The room tensed as board members nodded in agreement. Jessica realized Morton was right. They were too powerful, too entrenched. She needed something more. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Storage room now. Margaret Wells was in the building. As chaos erupted in the conference room, Jessica received another text. Chun's room. Emergency. Lucas. Jessica turned to share the message, but stopped short. His expression had changed. Cold, calculating, familiar. She'd seen that look before, on the faces of the protectors. You knew, she whispered. All along. Not all along, Lucas replied quietly. But yes, my father was the administrator they caught embezzling funds. The car accident wasn't arranged by the protectors. It was staged to protect him. He's been helping manage their offshore accounts ever since. The betrayal hit Jessica like a physical blow. You used me to get inside information. I used you to help expose them, Lucas corrected. The protectors are destroying this hospital, but they're too powerful to fight directly. We needed someone on the inside, someone they wouldn't suspect. The CEO's rebellious daughter was perfect. Before Jessica could respond, alarms blared from the ICU. Chen was coding. Go, Lucas said. Save him. I'll handle things here. Why should I trust you? Because unlike the protectors, I actually want to save lives. Jessica raced to Chun's room, finding Margaret Wells, disguised as a night nurse, already there, blocking two administrators from entering. The real nurses are locked in the break room, Margaret explained quickly. They were going to inject him with potassium chloride, make it look like heart failure. Together, they stabilized Chen. Margaret handed Jessica a final piece of evidence, a recorded confession from a former protector, detailing years of systematic murder and fraud, including names, dates, and account numbers. Lucas helped me gather this, Margaret revealed. His father's guilt ate at him until he died. For real this time. Lucas has been working against the protectors ever since, feeding me information. Jessica immediately called the reporter from the conference room. Within hours, police swarmed the hospital. Victor, Morton, and the board members were led out in handcuffs, their network of corruption finally exposed. The final scene unfolded in Victor's office as he waited for police processing. Jessica stood in the doorway, remembering all the times she'd sought his approval. You could have been part of something powerful, he said quietly. I already am, she replied. I'm part of something honest. 3 months later, Jessica stood at a podium in the same conference room. The hospital had been reformed, with a new board focused on ethical patient care. Chen and Edna sat in the front row, healthy and smiling. Hillbrook Hospital was built on a promise. Jessica addressed the crowd. A promise to protect and heal. Today, we restore that promise. Our new patient advocacy program will ensure transparency, ethical treatment, and genuine protection for every person who comes through these doors. Lucas stood at the back, nodding slightly. The relationship would never be the same, but their shared mission to heal the hospital had created a different kind of trust. The story made national headlines. Hospital corruption ring exposed by CEO's daughter. But for Jessica, the real story was simpler. It was about choices, choosing truth over power, integrity over profit, and most importantly, choosing to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. As she walked the hospital corridors that evening, Jessica passed the nurses' station where her journey had begun. Her designer watch was long gone, replaced by a practical medical timepiece. She wasn't the same person who had reluctantly started an internship months ago. She had found her calling, not in fashion or social media, but in ensuring that hospitals remained places of healing, not hunting grounds for the powerful. The old sign, reading the Protector's Endowment Wing, had been replaced with a new one, the Wells Blackwood Patient Advocacy Center, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of protection come from standing up to those who abuse power, no matter the personal cost. End of story.